Welcome to our posts. Today, we will see stories of r/entitled parents. My parents lost their minds when my older brother refused to move back home after college. I've been away for 2 years, and I kinda expected I'd be back to post one last time in 2024, because my brother went for a 4-year bachelor's degree, much like I currently am. For those who remember my previous posts, I'm the guy whose parents basically got their butts verbally handed to them by the family for bad favoritism towards my older brother. Crap really hit the fan on my 18th birthday because my parents barely put any effort into it, and went all out on my brother's 18th in 2020, during the pandemic. They even managed to get a DJ for the party, and then they presented him with a car. Well, on my 18th, I got no car, or even anything close to a similar party. Even though my academic standing was better than my brother's, I basically worked too hard for my parents' approval, and never got it. When I asked them why my brother got a car and not me, they claimed my brother worked harder for it, which was later confirmed to be not true when I got a bigger scholarship. My grandma happened to be eavesdropping and laid into my parents. Then she got the rest of the family involved, and for the record, they were planning on getting involved anyway. My grandma just stepped things up right then. But after several family members laid into them, my parents, just to try and save face, bought me a car, but treated me like a brat who was getting a new toy when they gave me the keys. It was a late 90s Subaru that I thought was great, but turned out to have a blown head gasket that had barely been holding together with sealer. My parents treated me like I was a brat for wanting equal treatment. And then when the car went bad, their reaction was to apathetically shrug and call it karma, which caused my grandparents to start it all over again with them, and caused a family intervention. I got many people messaging me and asking if having a car was really necessary, and that I basically forced my parents into it. I forced nothing, and it would have happened anyway if I didn't ask my parents why. And I really did need the car. I had no way of having a job without one. My parents lived 10 miles from the nearest bus stop. I literally had no way of making money before college without a car. And no, I couldn't get rides. No one was available for that on a daily basis. So many people I talked to here tried to dance around my reasoning to inset their own logic, many of which I felt like were projecting their own problems onto me. And then there was the straight-up trolls and jerks. I don't even want to repeat, let alone remember what they all said to me. But a lot of them kept it up after I got the NTA verdict like they had an axe to grind. And it really didn't help my mental state at the time. As you can imagine, my family laid into my parents all over again in that family intervention. And by the time they were done, they looked like scolded kids sitting there looking at their feet. The Subaru was sold as junk, and my grandparents essentially forced my parents to buy me a better car, a Honda Civic, and my uncle went over the car with a fine-toothed comb before they bought it. And that time my parents didn't even treat me like a brat. And yes, I still have the Honda. And yes, it still runs just fine. I've kept up with oil changes and the like. No accidents either. I've been a careful driver. The final thing that broke my parents before I left was finding out that I got a better scholarship than my brother. Any excuses they'd previously had to favor my brother so completely were thrown out the window, and were forced to give me words of encouragement I knew they didn't mean, and in wondering why they disliked me so much. I later found out from my grandma why I was treated differently was because my parents had wanted their second child to be a girl. My grandma ended up admitting even more to me later after I left for college. Before I was born, my parents were so convinced that I'd be a girl that they bought a bunch of girl stuff without even checking my gender through ultrasound. Well, I found out from my grandma about a year ago that my mother had tried to raise me like a girl for like the first 6 months of my life. She was putting me in girls' clothes and calling me by a different name. My father enabled it all. I know it's true because my grandma showed me old family photos of me with my brother when I was an infant, and I was wearing pink in all of them. There was even a visible name tag on some of the name my parents wanted for a girl. But once word got out, my parents stopped dressing me as a girl. My grandparents told my mother that trying to raise me as something I wasn't even giving me a choice on whether or not I wanted to be that. And though my family is rather old school, but my grandparents are surprisingly open-minded people, and they put the hammer down on my parents. So the girl treatment stopped. But instead of new clothes, they gave me my brother's hand-me-downs for years. Till my grandparents noticed that too, and did something about it. Finding out all of this, my grandparents kept my childhood from being far worse than it was. And they never told me until this past couple of years. I am incredibly thankful for them. My mother apparently struggled to call me by my real name for 2 years or so. And because my parents didn't get a girl, they refused to connect with me like they did my brother, the boy they'd actually wanted. And when my grandparents heard I wasn't getting anything new like my brother was, they threatened them to petition for guardianship of me. And they had evidence of the various things I described too. My parents couldn't stand for anything that could become a public scandal, so they stopped with the hand-me-downs and pretended to love me for a while. But as I got older, it degenerated into indifference, and then maybe into hate. I'm not sure. Hate means to still care in some way. But indifference is the actual opposite of love. I just know my parents couldn't accept that their favorite son wasn't the best at everything compared to their unwanted son. And since I moved out, they've barely interacted with family. They threw themselves into work. In part because the rest of the family forced them to contribute to my college like they did my brothers, but also because to them, working was the only thing that gave them a reason to tell everyone to leave them alone. My grandma suspects they've even slept in their cars a few times to avoid coming home. I only saw my parents at Christmas at my uncle's house for the past couple years, and they barely even spoke to me. Now that I was living my best life away from them, I guess you could say that they'd stopped bothering to act like I was their son. They don't want me anymore after the family humiliation they feel like they'd suffered, even though they know they brought it on themselves, and they've become workaholics that do little else. My grandmother told me my bedroom is basically exactly how I left it on the day I moved out. My parents have not even gone inside, but they kept my brother's room clean and ready for the day he'd finally come back home after college. Well, that didn't happen. They flew out to see him for his graduation, and had a big celebration with him. I was not invited to go as well. Not that I could afford it, but my grandparents went along, and they gave me the details. My parents were still convinced my brother would be coming back home, and that's when he awkwardly told them he had already secured a job through an internship he'd done the past year, and he'd found an apartment of his own too. My father became furious, and my mother lost her mind crying and begging him to come home. But he refused. You see, this past 2 years my brother and I have reconnected a bit. He found my Reddit account and called me. He wasn't angry, just wanted to talk. He admitted to me that our parents put him through a lot as well. Our mother absolutely smothered him, especially when I wasn't around. And our father was also quite strict with his expectations. So the fact that I did better than my brother when our parents had invested everything into him just broke them. And now they're extra broken because my brother refused to come home with them. The way our parents treated my brother is also the reason we stopped connecting as siblings until this past couple of years. He did bully me at times when we were growing up. But that's because being the favorite went to his head. But it was favoritism with strings attached. And when he realized that, he got counseling after moving out. My brother also has a girlfriend he met while in college, and he kept her a secret because he knew our parents wouldn't approve. And they didn't when they found out. Bro blew up at them when my mother referred to his girlfriend that she hadn't even met as a bad woman. Bro's girlfriend is in nursing school and a year from graduation herself. And my brother says she's the best. I've never met her, but she sounds wonderful by how he's described her. My grandma told me my mother went so far as to hire a private investigator to find out who my brother's girlfriend was, and was irritated to know that she was squeaky clean and from a good family on the same side politically too. But in her mind, she was the reason my brother wasn't coming back, even though Bro made it clear he'd decided that before even meeting his girlfriend. My father had basically become stoically silent about it from what I heard. But my mother let it slip to my brother that she'd hired a detective, and my brother gave our parents a piece of his mind. And this led to a whole argument about how they gave him everything, and he was ungrateful for not coming back. But he called them out that being the favored child is abuse too, because they nearly made him like them. It broke my parents to hear that. My brother told our grandparents, and they staged another family intervention. One I was even involved in through video call. My parents tried to not even pay attention to me. But even bro told them to talk to me. We all told them enough was enough. They have 2 sons, and they needed to start treating us fairly. Because they let something as idiotic as not being born the gender they wanted to ruin their love for me from day one. And pardon my language on this next part, my father hit his breaking point and yelled, "You want us to admit we effed up?" Well, yeah, we did. What do you want us to do? Time travel? We're paying for part of Ops college too. What more does he want from us? Things ended very poorly in that intervention. My mother cried that she was sorry to me. But even then I still didn't feel her heart was in it, because she didn't spend much time apologizing to me at all before moving on to my brother through the phone he was video calling from. And she spent a long time crying and apologizing to him, until he told her to go back and actually apologize to me like she meant it. That's when my father grabbed the phone and shut it off. Then he just sat down and told everyone to leave. The last thing my grandparents said to my parents was that they were so disappointed in them, and maybe losing both sons showed them they should never have favored one. Right now my parents are not on speaking terms with the rest of the family. My grandma heard a rumor they may be planning to move. But they have a paid-off country house and great careers. I feel like they'd be fools to move. But since my brother isn't going back, and I'm likely not either, I suppose it's not really an issue. I kinda doubt they'd welcome me and if I came to visit after the crap that went down. I am still thankful to them for helping to pay for my college. My student loans were significantly reduced thanks to them. But as parents, I think we can all agree they just didn't do a good job. TLDR, parents heavily favored my brother to the point of bankrolling his life and getting him a car. Attempted to cast me aside. Family intervened and forced them to be fair and get me a car too, as well as cover some of my college. My parents only got worse after I left home, and I learned even more crazy crap about how they tried to raise me as a girl from infancy. Then my brother graduated college and told our parents he was not coming back. Our parents lost it. Mother hired an investigator, made things worse. Big family intervention that failed, and now my parents are treating the entire family as being dead to them. Next story. Entitled Mom Wants Me to Marry My Abusive Stepbrother. Hey, been a bit. Sorry for the radio silence. I had some people asking for updates, but things had been pretty quiet until this weekend, so I had nothing to post. I know people usually do a recap or something like that, so TLDR. My mother has always preferred my F29 stepbrother Chris M42. He was my abuser growing up and seed me when from the time I was 11 to 16 when I moved with my half-brother after the worst attack. I recently was tracked down by my mother and she along my stepbrother have been harassing me since. Currently, I'm on a legal fight against them to recover some stolen inheritance from my father and trying to get in row, among other matters. This weekend, once again, my mother decided to accost me at work. I was working from home doing clerical work for the clinic I work at. I'm a nurse practitioner, but took some clerical duties to be able to work from home when the mess with my mother and Chris began. Since then, the time I could work from home has ended. So I am back in the clinic taking patients. For the most part, Saturday went well and quiet. Sunday, however, I noticed someone that shared my mother's name, but not her last name. My mom has a very unique name, very old sounding, and I've seen it only twice in my whole life. Of course, there's a big Latino community where I live, so I just assumed this was another person. We're from a Colombian family, though I was born in the U.S. to an American father. Lo and behold, it was my mother using a fake last name. When I saw her, I immediately called my boss. She's aware of the situation and immediately went to ask my mother to please leave the premises. This can be a controversial move, so to explain it before the debate starts, she was in for a general checkup, not a life or death treatment. She was not denied because of protected reasons, but because I, as a member of staff, felt my life was in danger in her presence. There's a lot of other clinics in varying prices, and they are open to get new patients, so she can get her checkup anywhere else. This is allowed in our state's law. If she was hyperventilating or clearly in distress, we would not be able to ask her to leave. My mother, of course, went on a rampage, demanding to be seen by me specifically. My boss, thankfully, was not intimidated and just insisted my mother had to leave or else the cops would be called. After a back and forth that I was watching from the security cameras, this all happened in our waiting room. My mother threw a letter at my boss and left fuming. She even pushed a lady that was walking in, though thankfully no one was hurt. My boss brought me the letter and told me she will make sure to not assign me any patients with my mother's first name and went to make arrangements with our front desk. I took a break and decided to read the letter, mostly to see if it was something I could use for my row. This is a translation to my best capabilities. My lovely daughter, it hurts me so much you refuse to speak to me. I love you so much and all I want is to recover the years we've lost. I only have you left from your father, whom I loved dearly. I know there's a lot of misunderstandings with Chris. He loves you so much too, and I wish you would give him a chance to prove it to you. He always talked about how beautiful you are and how much he wished you two could spend more time together. He truly adores you, and I wish you would consider his feelings more. He even asked me to convince you to marry him, and I think it's a wonderful idea. Papa stepfather and I are probably divorcing, and this will be the perfect solution so Chris, you and I can stay a family. He keeps going on and on about how much he wants to raise your and his baby together. Let me know when you want to go shopping for wedding dresses. I love you, my darling. Mom. I'm gonna share a few personal notes here. I am unable to get pregnant. After Chris' attack, I had some medical complications that have left me unable to conceive. My mother knows about it. Chris knows about it. The cops know about it. They rule the whole thing as consensual sex, and because I was 16, the legal age of consent, nothing was done. I show this to my lawyer, and he added it to the compilation of things we're using for the row. Still no court date, and the cops don't consider my case risky enough to do the paperwork for a temp order. I do have one officer who is taking this very seriously and has been amazing. It's just a majority who don't seem to care or have too much on their docket to give my case time. Update. I'm gonna update here since it's only been 3 days and feels dumb to make a new post. Chris has been arrested. Apparently he kidnapped a 2-year-old baby girl. His cousin's daughter, no less. The baby was recovered safe and unharmed, from what I heard. I'm glad she wasn't taken for long. Who knows what the hell he wanted to do to her? If I hear more details, I'll update. I'm trying to use this to get that temp row. Next story. My 40F toxic dad who traded his family for a gold digger demands to live with me. My 40F parents are divorced because my dad cheated. If you want the full details, I posted the story in Relationship Advice a few years ago. I don't know if I'm allowed to post links to other subreddits here, but you should be able to find it on my profile. I guess you could consider this an update. But the short version is, my mom found out my dad was cheating and started divorce proceedings. As a result, my dad got vindictive, and Alawad encouraged his mistress to get vindictive towards my mom. When his mistress broke up with him, he tried to come crawling back to my mom, who shut the door in his face, and he spent the whole divorce process lashing out at my mom, me, and my other siblings and our kids, to the point where we all had to go NC. Anyway, the divorce was finalized. Dad and his mistress have been off again. They had a kid together. There was some drama where he denied the kid was his, but he got a paternity test done, and it turns out it is his. Anyway, he showed up at my door a few weeks ago and told me he was going to stay with me. Not asked, told. And not just that, but he told, not asked, that while he was here, my husband and I needed to move into the guest room so he could have our room because it has an en suite. And, you know, he needs that. As you can imagine, I put my foot down. Hard. I told him after everything he did, how dare he darken my doorstep, and worse, not even to apologize, not even to ask how I am or how his grandkids are, but to dictate to me that he is staying in my house. I'm normally a pretty calm, go with the flow kind of person, but I just lost it and screamed all the things he did to us. The vindictive attacks. The way he used my kids as weapons to get back at me. The smear campaigns he led against my mom. He screamed back, "When you came crying home after your breakup with X, I let you stay in my house, eat my food, moon about in your room. I let you come home. I didn't act like a complete B***tch. To be clear, the breakup he's talking about was when my former fiancé cheated on me with multiple women. Oh, and also, for anyone who hasn't read my previous post, it's not his house, it's my mom's. And he tried to steal it from her during the divorce to give to his bratty mistress. I just shut the door on him. Long story short, police had to be called as my dad refused to leave. I found out today why he tried to stay with me. His mistress has been bleeding him dry with child support and alimony. I think they've broken up for good. He's had to sell every asset he had, and now he's broke. I know this because he's staying with my uncle, his brother, and he called me to let me know. The saddest, funniest part about all this is how my dad won't stop talking about how heartless and ungrateful I am to anyone who will listen. And he is posting passive-aggressive posts on his FB about how you do everything for your kids, but then they throw you to the curb. This whole ordeal over the last few years has been hard. I've been going to therapy and have slowly come to terms with the fact that my father isn't the man I thought he was. And likely, he never will be. But it brought back a lot of hurt. I can't believe he would do this. I just don't understand how somebody can do this, can behave this way. But it is what it is. But anyway, my dad, the entitled, vindictive little a-hole, everyone. Never thought I'd be able to say that, but there we go. TLDR, my dad, who threw a bomb in his family to be with his gold digger mistress, gets dumped by said mistress and demands to live with me as if nothing happened. Calls me selfish and ungrateful when I don't. I hope you guys like this video. If you did, make sure like, comment, share, and subscribe the channel our posts.